Well, hello everyone. It looks like you had missed our webinar possibly. And so I know everybody is insanely busy. The webinar had a lot of information on it, covered a lot of stuff in depth, but you didn't have the hour to dedicate to it. I understand it. I didn't want you to miss the key points though. So Samantha and I are going to share with you, let me pull that up, just kind of a recap of those seven deadly mistakes. And so the seven deadly mistakes that you missed out on are that you don't use personal guarantees. And, not using personal guarantees will cost you money. And something that we covered in the webinar in detail was 80% of the businesses will go out of business in the first 2 years. An additional 80% will go out in the additional 3 years. So you want to make sure that that principal and that owner of the company signs your personal guarantee, especially if you're supplying staffing, because if they don't feel confident enough to sign off on and absorb the risk, then why the heck should you? Samantha, real quick on personal guarantees, what's a couple of things they need to work on?
One thing, and I do know where there are some, credit applications that have it buried in, those are better than nothing. However, I'm a firm believer in having it as a separate agreement, just because the courts do view in a slightly different light. Trying to get another signature, I know, can be difficult, and Wilson's rolling his eyes because he hates when I get on the soapbox, but he knows that he's not having to clean up when they get
I agree. I agree.
But
the attorneys are always looking for the escape clause, and if it's not in an agreement off to the side, that is one of the escape gray areas that they'll try to use, and it drives me nuts.
And also make sure you get, get a signature is great, but if you can get details, get their personal address, things like that, because if all you know is it's John Smith and the store is at 123 Main Street and they fall behind and get evicted from there, and you're chasing a ghost.
A very good point. Another thing, Sam, that drives me nuts is they don't become secured creditors. Now, in the webinar, we covered that in detail. In essence, there's some magic wording that you can put into your fee agreement that gives you the permission to file a UCC1. It's kind of like a mortgage. The first one that's in there is the first mortgage holder. Second one's the second mortgage holder, and it needs to be filed in their courthouse. Sam, 2-minute overview on a UCC1 filing.
Basically, I can give an overview, but it would be a slight waste because I can give a really great Georgia and Alabama overview, being barred in Georgia and then having gone to law school in Alabama. Each state has slightly different rules. Okay. And also, one recommendation I can make, especially with as much as you're seeing business going across state lines, file it where your debtor is located.
Very good news on that. In the webinar, we go into detail on that. But get a UCC1 filing. The other one is the creditor should always add to their credit application the following sentence. The debtor agrees to pay any and all litigation out of the collections in the state of whatever your jurisdiction is. But it basically says that they agree to pay, and also you have jurisdictional clause in there. Now, the issue with that can create some problems with jurisdictional clauses. From a collection standpoint, we can work around it. But the biggest thing is you don't get them in your agreements now, as a general rule, to pay for attorneys and credit fees. Sam, 2-minute overview on that clause on being able to file it in your state.
It's one of those where I'm very conflicted on it. In a negotiation standpoint, where we can argue and do things such as, say you're going to have to fight this in, Florida and they're in California, it works out.
Right.
If they have a national bank, we don't have to worry about it that much because Wells Fargo, things like that. but you do run into some complications in litigation on who has to travel, and okay, if you have it in your backyard but they're somewhere else, having to actually collect on it as well.
I agree.
In the webinar, we go into much more detail because I can sit here and argue both sides of this until Wilson cuts off my mic.
I understand. Well, the fourth mistake that they always make is you don't do your due diligence. You know, a simple going out and doing a Google search on a company, we have found literally high-speed chases on the debtor that we were collecting from, where they went through, and I say high-speed chase, where they were going through a car wash. Absolutely hysterical.
I don't know if we accomplished anything in the office that day with us gathered around watching the video on repeat.
Had our client or any future client that had done just a simple, due diligence on it. Also, Secretary of State will tell you how long they've been in business. And if they tell you they've been in business 20 years and the Secretary of State says they've only been there 2, there's a problem. You need to look deeper into it. The fifth mistake that they make is you don't review the company's credit app as far as on basing it by risk. A lot of times, even if our client Samantha will check credit, and most of them don't, they'll go ahead and they'll check credit, and then they throw away the credit application, never to be revisited again. They need to recheck that credit app every 12 months just to kind of go through there. A sixth mistake that we covered in detail is if it goes bad, they don't have a predetermined action plan where they start sending out automated letters, making basically follow-up calls and things on those lines. So you need to have a process. The seventh mistake that they make is they don't set credit limits. Some people are a wonderful $5,000 credit risk, but they're a horrible $50,000 credit risk. And so they need to set credit lines. We go into detail in that webinar on how to set webinars. If you'd like to, or how to set credit limits in that webinar. If you want to go through in all of these in detail, register for the webinar or shoot me an email and we'll send you a link. Samantha, closing statements on these 7 mistakes. No, half of them are legal, half of them are more risk-based. But what's the biggest mistake that they need to avoid?
I think something that one isn't on here, but I'm seeing is becoming a mistake that people get things signed.
Yes.
Because that goes into the personal guarantee. Get everything signed.
I agree with you 100%.
And I think just knowing who you're dealing with, because I can't tell you how many times I've gotten, also that comes back to researching on the Secretary of State. They may be doing business under a DBA, and we've had accounts that the forwarding attorneys and I have spent hours researching, and we can't figure out who the hell the client was ever dealing with.
Exactly. It seems like it should be a lot easier, but if you're dealing with ABC company and ABCD company, in the eyes of the law, they're 2 different companies if they're incorporated under those names. It's like different individuals with different DNAs. Join us on the webinar if you missed it, but if you don't have the time, at least we wanted to cover the topic. Sam, I appreciate you joining and sharing what everybody missed on that webinar.
Anytime.